in the remote corners of Indonesia, where the architecture of the colonial era still stands as a decaying monument to the past, stories of the unseen often take root. This particular account comes from a subscriber who recently moved into an ancestral home, a structure built nearly a century ago. They described the air inside as heavy, almost pressurized, as if the oxygen had been replaced by the weight of 1,000 unspoken secrets. The house was supposed to be a sanctuary, a piece of family history, but from the very first night it became clear that the silence of the hallways was not a lack of sound, but a living, breathing entity waiting for acknowledgement.
Our witness, whom we will call Eris, is a person of logic and routine. He didn't believe in the supernatural, viewing old houses simply as puzzles of wood and stone. However, the first anomaly wasn't a visual one, it was atmospheric. Every evening at precisely 3 a.m., the temperature in the master bedroom would plummet. It wasn't the natural cooling of the night, but a localized, piercing chill that felt as though ice were being pressed against his skin. He began to notice a peculiar scent, the smell of old incense mixed with the metallic tang of dried blood. It was a sensory warning that something ancient and malevolent had been disturbed by his presence. By the third night, the auditory disturbances began. Eris described the sound of heavy, rhythmic footsteps pacing the length of the attic directly above his head. These weren't the scuttling of rodents or the settling of floorboards. They were the deliberate, weighted steps of someone wearing heavy boots or robes. He recorded the audio, and in the playback, a faint, rhythmic chanting can be heard beneath the floor's creaks. It was a guttural, monotone repetition in a language he couldn't identify, but the cadence suggested a ritual. The house was no longer just a building. It was becoming a vessel for a frequency that should have remained silent.
The visual manifestations started subtly, shadows that didn't match the light sources, and reflections in mirrors that lingered a second too long. But then came the sighting that changed everything. Eris was walking toward the kitchen when he saw a figure standing in the doorway of the study. It was tall, draped in a black habit that seemed to absorb all surrounding light. The figure did not move. It didn't breathe. It stood with its back to him, its presence radiating a sense of profound grief and absolute malice. Eris froze, his mind struggling to process the silhouette of what looked like a nun, an image that felt entirely out of place in his family's history.
The entity, which Eris now refers to as the Valak figure due to its striking resemblance to the demonic nun of lore, began to manifest with more aggression. Objects were no longer just moved, they were destroyed. Religious icons that had been in the house for decades were found turned toward the wall or shattered on the floor. This was a clear act of defiance, a mockery of the sacred. The air grew so thick with the smell of decay that Eris found it difficult to breathe. He felt a constant pressure on his chest, as if an invisible hand were slowly tightening its grip, testing his resolve and draining his energy.
Sleep became impossible. Every time Eris closed his eyes, he saw the face of the entity, pale, sallow skin stretched tight over a skeletal frame, and eyes that burned with a predatory yellow light. One night, he woke to find the figure standing directly at the foot of his bed. Its hands were folded neatly, but its head was tilted at an impossible, unnatural angle. He described the sensation as a total paralysis, a state of tonic immobility, where he could only watch as the entity leaned forward. It didn't speak, but it emitted a low-frequency hum that vibrated through his very bones, a sound of pure, concentrated hatred.
The psychological toll was immense. Eris began to feel like a stranger in his own body, his thoughts clouded by a persistent dark fog. He noticed that the shadows in the house were moving independently of the time of day. Dark patches would appear on the walls, resembling the shape of the entity, only to vanish when he approached. He contacted a local historian who revealed that the house had been built on the site of an abandoned chapel that had been closed down under mysterious and violent circumstances. It seemed the entity wasn't just visiting, it was reclaiming a territory that it believed belonged to the darkness.
The climax of the haunting occurred when Eris decided to film the study overnight. The footage, which we have analyzed, shows the door opening slowly on its own. A few moments later, the figure emerges from the darkness, moving with a jerky, stop-motion-like gait. It approaches the camera until its face fills the entire frame. The expression is one of hollowed-out agony, a mask of death that seems to mock the living. At that moment, all the lights in the house exploded simultaneously. Eris realized that this wasn't a ghost seeking peace, it was a demonic force feeding on his fear, growing stronger with every passing second he remained in the house. Fearing for his life, Eris abandoned the house that very night, leaving most of his belongings behind. He didn't even stop to lock the door. As he drove away, he looked back in the rearview mirror and saw the figure standing in the upper window, watching him leave. Even now, living in a modern apartment miles away, he claims he still hears that rhythmic chanting in the quiet moments before sleep. The house remains empty, a dark stain on the landscape that locals refuse to pass after dark. Some things cannot be explained by science or logic. They can only be survived. The terror of Valak wasn't just a movie for Eris. It was a reality that nearly consumed him.
Stories like these remind us that the world is far more complex and terrifying than we often care to admit. Was this a genuine demonic manifestation or a psychological echo of a violent past? The evidence Eris provided suggests something truly jungle, something abnormal occurred in that house. We will continue to monitor this case and provide updates if more information surfaces. If you have had a similar experience, share your story in the comments below. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the unknown. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates. Stay safe and keep your lights on.